Guys, so today I was at my YouTube homepage, and then there was the ending game of this very interesting game, so I decided to go after the PGN of it. And the game was played between Caruana and Garry Kasparov at the Blitz chess at St. Louis from this year. Caruana was white in this game, and Kasparov was black, and this was round 12. E4, and Kasparov went for c5 Sicilian defense, knight to c3, d6, knight g e2, knight to f6 by Kasparov, g3, and here Kasparov went for the Dragon Sicilian variant with pawn to g6, planning to get the bishop fianchetto, creating a very solid defense around the king after castle, and also the knight to c6 that is part of the dragon variant. Anyways, here white done the fianchetto as was planning to, and now knight to c6, d3, and bishop to g7, completing the dragon variant of the Sicilian defense. Both sides castled, and now a3, preventing the entrance of the knight on b4, and rook to b8, probably planning to advance pawns, and with the support of the rook to capture pawns or pieces. White responded at the height with the same reply, b1, and now b6 by black and b4 by white. Kasparov kept developing his pieces with bishop to b7. I noticed all the pieces of black are already connected, while white has yet to develop the bishop to connect everything. Pawn to h3, knight to d7, bishop to e3, rook to e8, queen to d2, creating a good connection between the dark square's bishop and the queen. And now bishop to a8. This bishop to a8 movement is just a time buyer, because, well, at such positioning you don't know quite sure what white is up to, so you just make this waiting movement, not compromising the position too much, to see what will going on after all. Here white made a very aggressive move, which was pawn to f4, now rook to c8, g4, e6, and f5. You can see that white is trying to exchange pawns in order to create attacking columns. Knight to d4, and this knight to d4 could be not replied at all. But I don't know, Caruana was scared of something. You could just make some kind of other movement trying to develop. But the thing here is that you can answer with knight takes knight, because if you answer with knight takes knight, then simply pawn takes pawn, and suddenly you have two pieces in threat. And also, this is a very good diagonal. This could be a very good diagonal for the bishop, for the dark square's bishop to act into later on. But anyways, here Caruana decided to take the knight with the bishop to avoid the blunder of two pieces getting threatened by a pawn, and then pawn takes bishop back. Knight to b5, double attacking the pawn, and here black decide to continue developing with, damn it, with pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn back. Knight to e5, and here white took the pawn back, and d5 by black, getting into the center. Queen to f4, probably had some ideas of concocting, of making an attack into the f7 pawn, but here black took the pawn on the center and white has to reply it. And now queen to c7, with possibly ideas of retreating the knight and then proposing a queen straight. And also this queen to c7 supports the pawn on f7, so the attack of white can't become quite effective, not now at least. And now pawn Caruana decided to advance his pawn instead of trading with f6 to kick the bishop away. Bishop to f8, rook to b3, planning rook to c3, attacking the queen. And here I'd say this movement is quite odd, but it was a very important move for the ending position. Yes, I'm already spoiling it, but anyways, knight to c4. c3 happened either the way of colors, because you know knight doesn't attack what is on his front, so the knight is basically pinned now because of the queen. Sorry, I jumped a little. Here black played a6, and now white decided to trade the queens. And again the knight is pinned because the rook is not supported here, so if the knight moves somewhere else, the rook's falling. Knight to f3, f4 I mean, sorry. And now b5, fully supporting the knight, so this basically became a post of the knight. Knight to d5, attacking the rook, and now Kasparov connected the rooks again with rook to c8 and rook to d3, bishop to d6, knight to b3. And here just an add that quite the obvious movement came here, because you know you're in a situation that your opponent doesn't have one of the bishops anymore, and you have the pair of bishops, so trading a strong knight by a bishop is not a problem at all, and this pretty well centralized knight is quite strong, so black decided to get rid of it with the trade of his light squares bishop. And so the trade happened, and now rook to e5, planning to double the rooks. Knight to c5, a5. The idea here is pretty simple, of course. The pawn can't take the pawn, or else the knight's falling with check. Here white doesn't have much to do, so it doubles the rooks. And now a4, basically shutting any kind of action around the b file for white. Rook to f1, and rook from c to e8, and now rook to f3. You can see that white is not getting any kind of game. White is not knowing what to do exactly, and is just messing around. And now h5, and knight to d3, attacking the rook, and now rook to e2. And this is pretty deadly, so white attempted to trade the rooks, but no success because Kasparov went back to e3. And now f3 again, persisting on the trade out, e2, and rook from f1 to f2. And of course the rook can go to e1, or else knight takes rook, and the position that is, believe if you want, is quite better for black here would be lost. King to h7, and now bishop to f1, kicking this rook away, and now rook to e4. Knight c5, attacking the rook, rook to e1, pinning the bishop because the space was obtained, you know, the knight left the post he was before. And now king to g2. I think that here black should return the knight to d3. It would be a better defense because the rook could stay on the base yet, but anyways, that wasn't the reply of white. Instead g2. And now knight to e3 check, king to h1, knight took the pawn here on d5. Of course not taking the bishop because the bishop is way over protected yet, so it wouldn't be worth. Rook, and now rook to d3, attacking both the knight and the bishop, so the knight can't retreat or else the bishop falls. But here Kasparov simply played e5, protecting the knight. Knight to d7, traded territory and also attacking the rook, but simply rook to g5, which is an ideal square because now the white's king is basically trapped into the h file. Now rook to f3. As I mentioned before, white doesn't have much of a counter game yet, so it's just trying to improve the position or wait for some black blunder. And bishop to c7, white back to c5, h4, rook to d4, and bishop got an ideal square here, which is the g3 square, and that was the intention of the pushing from the pawn from h5 to h4. Knight to d3, rook to a1, attacking the pawn and also getting away from the knight threat, of course. Rook to e4, and rook to e4 has the clear intention of invading the territory, and as you can put properly defense here, of course you just accept it. Anyways, Kasparov took the pawn, and now rook to e7, and Kasparov misses, sorry. And here the intention is sacrificing the rook, because if knight takes the rook on e7, then pawn takes knight back, and you can't stop the promotion because the knight takes control of the e5 square, which would be the only square possible for the rook trying to avoid the promotion. And of course taking the knight is not valid as well, because the promotion would happen either way, so you can't actually take this rook. It's just a poisoned rook. And here Kasparov played g8. This g8 movement is quite comprehensible actually, because now white has to check, and now king back to h7. This is just some time buyer movement, you know, because this pawn on f7 is already lost, but black wanted to buy some time before losing it. Anyways, rook was played to f8, and now rook to a1, pinning the bishop again, and this was what made black win, because after rook takes pawn with check, king back to g8, rook to g7 check, king to f8, rook to a7, and rook to a7 has the intentions of advancing this pawn, and after advancing this pawn, and as the f3 rook is supporting this pawn, then simply rook to a8 on the next movement, and the pawn would promote with no way to stop. So that's why Kasparov played rook to f5 to break the connection of the rooks into the pawn. Here the trade out of rooks happened, and the spinning on the bishop was victorious because of this. After the rook trade is out, even if white didn't play that, the same thing would happen, because the only available square for the king is g2 and the bishop spinned. King to g2 had the only and simple intention of unpinning the bishop, but it's too late because knight jumps to e3 with check and the bishop's lost. And now king to f3 and knight takes bishop, knight to c5, trying to go up there to create some kind of counterplay, but it's too late because after rook to e1, controlling the center and busting the king of advancing any further, the game is lost. The king can't get a safe area, you know. He can't leave to the e column, and now he can only stay around here as the bishop and the pawn are taking control of important squares. So after this, white tried something with g2, but now knight to e3, king back to f3, knight to c4, rook to a6. Here probably a better continuation would have been the check, trying to provoke some kind of mistake, but white didn't play that, and now black finalized the game with d2 check. Notice that the king can't go anywhere else but the g2 square, because knight takes control of this square, rook takes control of the e file, the pawn takes control of two important squares as well, the bishop takes control of the f4 file, so king can only go to g2, followed by e2 check, and h1, and after h2 check, white resigned because it's forced mate in 3. Just to explain the forced mate, the king can only go to g1 now, and after g1 the knight would go to f3 check, and knight to f3 check would take control of both the g1 and e1 squares, and so the king and the rook takes control of the h1 square at this moment, so the king would have to go to f1, and after f1 the rook would simply go to f2 supported by the bishop, and this is checkmate. But here after h2, as I said, Caruana resigned because he saw the forced mate and decided not to continue the game anymore. And by the way, the title was very attracting, you know. As I said, I saw this on YouTube, and the title was How Kasparov Nervously Checkmated Caruana with something like this, with short time on the clock. It was something similar to this. So he was with short time on the clock and he checkmated Caruana. It was an increment of 3 seconds by play, but when Kasparov reached this position of the h2 check, Kasparov had 4 or 3 seconds left into his clock. So yeah, it was a very tight checkmate. But anyways, it was a great miniature by Garry Kasparov, showing that he's still rocking on, even though he is quite aged already, and lost some of his skill, but when he is to bring a good game, he does this yet. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I see you next